this is interesting. This is really getting really interesting. How does one really get to know? As a teacher, I also grapple with, having been part of probably one of the finest B schools in the country and probably the oldest, when we do grading. We are not, I have no shame in admitting that yes, we also are victims of the same symptom that I'm trying to discuss with all of you. We grade students, and when the students know that we have to grade them, the hyper competitive, should I say the monster of the hyper competition creeps into them and leads to depression, anxiety. Yeah. I really don't know. I also find myself at my wit's end. I really don't know what to do. At the same time, I need to be a human to them. It is not part of any particular corporate entity any longer. It is part of every entity. Now, staying on here, and this is pretty interesting what you said, you have to induce some stress, as Daniela Kaufer, the neuroscientist, said. There is some amount of cortisol that is required, but you ensure that cortisol is always stays within the limits. Rather than that, more you need to have dopamine and oxytocin and of course serotonin. So how do we, if I can really pick your brain, Mr. Shailendra, how does a corporation or probably any entity, business entity and non-business entity, or an academic institution like ours, how does it really figure out to what extent do we celebrate victory? Do we celebrate, let's say, stress? And do we celebrate competition?
First of all, there's not a particular moment or a particular act which kind of leads to a person who feels mentally exhausted. Mm-hmm. I would like to use the word mentally exhausted instead of saying that mental health or something like that, because most of us are. And I have no shame in admitting that I have been through, and I'm just recovering from the process. I've been through my counseling sessions. That is one of the reasons, like when he spoke about quite quitting, I was there and I could see the signs, and I said, I'm not going to do this anymore because it's hurting me. It had nothing to do. My entire colleagues were very supportive. My family was very supportive. My organization was very supportive. Right? They were all the tools like you spoke about. We had app, we had a counselor on call. I could talk to that people. I had 6 odd counseling sessions, and it had nothing to do with pressures of performance. It was sometimes the pressures happen because of very individual reasons as well. So you can't hold accountable a particular act that has led to. We can't carpet bomb. All right. So one thing that worked in my favor was I could see the signs. I was possibly blessed. In organizations or in academia, I think people should be made aware of what are the signs or telltale signs of a person going through some kind of a difficulty. All right, be it managers, be it professors, be it the leadership. I should know, or I should spread that awareness that this person is going through some difficulty. People do mask at times. Okay, those might be some exceptions. But it's very evident that when a person says, oh, you're not looking right, everything okay? And when the person says everything okay, that means that awareness or that person has not opened up and is still living under the taboo that we spoke about. So, looking at the science rather than getting into a cause and effect, looking for the cause, is somebody else going to do that? My job should be, as where you are, could be look at the science rather than looking at the cause and trying to fix the cause, and helping individuals because the causes might be different for them. So I need to be trained, I need to have all the policies and all the procedures into place, but as team members or as people who are working together or teaching them, should know what are the telltale signs, and they should be reported if the person is living under a taboo, that somebody comes and helps that person. That's how it works, because looking for a cause, there can be a dime of plenty. I have everything going for me. Right? I have a life which people could be envious of. But if I could go through that with this level of emptiness in my head and what am I doing over here, nothing seems to excite me. If I can go through that, I can understand an average Joe could, and there was no cause for it. The cause could, even my psychologist could not look for a cause. I had 6 sessions, but she did help me in terms of its certain exercises and going through graduating towards mindfulness. See, it's very easy to say, start meditating and be mindful. And that is, if you go through the entire process, mindfulness is way, that's the 4th step. And if you're telling me to take the 4th step straight away, I'm going to fall down further. Could be performance, could be personal relationships, could be lack of purpose in life, could be lack of excitement in life. Causes could be huge. Rather than focusing on the causes, let's look at the science and let's try and get people that kind of help and spread awareness and have the organizations and maybe academia to address them. That's what I feel.
I think the benign processes can create, even benign processes can create malign, impacts. So if you have toxic leaders who are, driving those processes, one very important, and it is not an HR issue. I mean, I don't consider this. I mean, it's if I am a team leader, I can at times, we are used to seeing your colleague every day, and you can look at his face and figure out something is not right.
Absolutely.
So I think the leader should be trained, and that's where I would use the word training, to have empathy, where they look beyond the work that they expect from a person. See, a cow you milk every day may be sick one day. So you have to just give that cow some space and not kick it because it is not able to give you the same amount of milk on that day. So you have to be trained to develop certain level of empathy so that you are able to, people have empathy in them, and those who don't have empathy in them have to be told that if you don't do this, cow will not be able to give milk on that day, you will suffer. So give them some kind of an incentive. And second thing is, I think we are not a culture where we know how to give feedback. That empowers. So often, either we don't give feedback or the feedback we give is very, very counterproductive. So that is where, you require. And third thing is, I think the best friend who can pull you out of a situation is someone who sees you every day, who knows you. Then a psychologist or a counselor who takes time to figure you out. And we have to also believe that we all are different. I mean, each individual is different. So,
yeah, but this is also, Prof, as you will understand, I'm sure, it's also a very complicated issue. It's a very nuanced issue because, as my friend here mentioned, you could have mental health issues which may have no causation anchored in work. You could have something happening at your personal life home front, right? Yeah. Now, as a team leader or as a manager to whom somebody reports into, right, you need to also now figure out, and I think this is where the grey part is, as to how much to intervene or not intervene, interfere or not interfere in an employee's headspace if that headspace is disturbed on account of something which is not work related, right? Are you intruding in somebody's privacy? Absolutely. Is that welcome? Absolutely. Is that not welcome? Right. Does he or she like it or not like it? Is he or she going to turn around and say, you mind your own business, I'm doing whatever I need to do here? How do you deal with that kind of a situation? I think this is a subject which needs to be explored much more. Like POSH in recent years has been explored much more than it was 10 years ago. I think this subject also is not an easy binary subject. It has many, many nuances where, and I'm speaking from a workspace point of view, because that's what the topic is. A workspace point of view, how much can you go beyond a professional relationship in trying to resolve a teammate's situation, a mental situation, right? How much would be, what kind of an intervention or how much of an intervention will be welcomed, should be welcomed, professionally, should it be offered, not offered? Should you curtail yourself only to, if the headspace problem is got to do only with the work environment and only then you intervene? But we're all human beings. We live interconnected lives. There's a lot of things that could be happening with our spouses, with our friends, with our children, with other aspects.
Wonderful. This is a brilliant perspective. In fact, you are actually nudging me to ask you a question which has got now multiple layers now. You talked about, all of you, you particularly referred to organizations and people as as a teacher, I somehow stay away from that word. But let me tell you, toxic. I don't know where people are actually toxic or not. They actually do things which are toxic. Sadly, they may not mean to do that. But how do we, let's stay with the organization. How do we know, looking at an organization, how do we know by applying some kind of hygiene that this organization itself is taking care of mental health as a top priority policy objective? What is a kind of checklist? If I can ask you. Any one of you, of course.
I would like to have the checklist.
No, that's what I'm saying. What is a checklist? What kind of checklist as a leader would you say there are 4 things which must be there on the card? To if they are getting ticked, you would say no. This institution, and I think it was very nuanced. This is very complicated, very complex. But as far as organizations are concerned, are they doing well? That at least they are not the reason, they are not the cause of somebody's mental health and not being taken care of.
I don't know about a checklist or not, but I'll just pick on from where he left his previous comment. If somebody is under-delivered or underperformed, how is and therefore failed, failure was, let's say, the word that we used, how does the organization react to that failure? Right. That person at that point of time is probably at his lowest ebb. Does the organization or the manager or the report or the senior use that as an opportunity to further step on that person and bury him or her into the ground? Or does he get into a constructive conversation on what led to that failure? And can the organization provide solutions, inputs, trainings, conversation to ensure that we learn from that failure and that failure is not repeated? So I don't know if that is a checklist or not. I think it's a lot about the organization cultures and something that he spoke about earlier, policy versus culture. How does the organization deal with failure? Because enough is spoken about how organizations deal with success. Your increments happen because of your success. Your promotions happen because of your success. Your grade changes, level changes. But people don't consciously want to intentionally fail.
Absolutely.
Right? And yet they do. So is it that you have a wrong person doing a wrong job or a right person doing a wrong job? I was hired to do something else, but as part of my growth in the company, I was given extra responsibilities to do something beyond what I was originally hired for. And in those extra responsibilities, I have not been able to perform. And therefore, my core work that I was doing was also suffering. So the organization was giving me what it called as opportunities to grow by making me do things which were beyond my skill set and yet not adequately training me to do that. And I failed there. And I have a low self-esteem. As a result, even what I was doing well, I started doing that also poorly. So I'm saying these are, and therefore I'm saying it's a nuanced kind of a subject. It requires a deeper investigation. But if I was to be giving you a small, simple answer, it is, how does the organization deal with failure or an underperforming employee? Does it just put that employee on a probation or a PIP? Or does it actually proactively reach out to understand what happened and provide inputs? I think that part of the culture of the organization is probably what needs to
what
get.
Also has been,
I think it's purely a leadership issue.
Right.
Well, I had a leader who told me, don't worry, life is not a 100-meter dash. It's a marathon. You can always make up in the second round. I mean, it was like someone, injecting energy, into me. I mean, he said, fine, okay. It's a pure leadership issue. I mean, how does a leader communicate in what? Well, I have heard that Apple CEO was very tough. I mean, he used to sort of strip people down, but still Apple became such a successful company. How many people died of stress?
We don't know. Absolutely.
We don't
Absolutely.
know. So,
Absolutely.
That's I think so reinforcing the point he said. Success is celebrated, but what has
Nobody has
at
seen
what
the
cost
trajectory.
is really
Absolutely.
not known. And this taboo piece is something very, very interesting. We need to ask ourselves a question. Well, if I'm the person who's into talent acquisition, and a person opens up and says, why did you leave this job? Why do you have 4 months of gap? And the person says, I was burnt out. I was mentally not there. And that's why I took a break. Would we give that person a job? Because now we are cynics in our head to say, oh, this person kind of breaks down very easily, because the whole tough guy attitude that, winners never quit kind of a inverted commas still plays largely looms over organization. So, what if he breaks down again? So that is why sometimes it becomes a huge taboo, because we are
really interesting. This is really interesting.
Yeah. So we don't. So 4 months, what did you do? I did nothing. I was just getting my mind space cleared. I needed some time
absolutely.
off.
We should be fine.
But are we? That's the question.
I think no.
We should be.
Are we? That's what probably it goes back to the basics earlier when you were saying it is very complex, very layered. So don't you think as a policy that when we look at career breaks as leaders, do we need to have a different mental model? I mean, we need to look at career breaks differently from the way we are looking at probably. We are arresting it rather than reacting to mental health. How do we install mental health as a policy parameter? Could it be that?
So yes, let me just give another nuance to what he just said, right? He said, my boss told me that life is not a 100-meter dash and you will win. Be at it, etc., etc. As part of our appraisal process, do we have a yardstick or a factor where especially people who lead teams are assessed on their team members' performance?
Absolutely.
And have they been able to improve their performance through the course of the year or through the course of multiple quarters? I'm saying if I have a leader and I have 5 people, 6 people working in my team, and I can see somebody who, and it's not an HR issue, I'm saying it's a leadership issue. It's not HR appraisal system, I mean leadership. If I have to be appraised, am I being appraised at any point of time beyond my numbers and achievements for how I have made a specific team member of mine perform better, who would have widely otherwise been recognized as somebody who has failed in the past or maybe suffering from a mental issue?
Valid point, very valid point.
We're not appraised based on that as a vector. Right? If you were to be appraised, automatically you'll become more conscious and proactive in identifying a problem and maybe trying to give a solution. Although again, as I said, nuance. Sometimes in your enthusiasm, the solution that you give, if you're not trained, could be a wrong solution. And that's another bigger problem than bigger disaster.
Or it might be a threat for the person.
Yeah. But I'm saying it needs to be enshrined as company's culture that do you enable performance from people reporting into you? Can you make them perform? Can you make them better versions of themselves?